Joining me live now from Rocky is the Nationals Senator Matt Canavan. Are you in Rocky or Yeppoon? I always get confused.
Yeppoon, mate.
Yeah, you're in Yeppoon. Beautiful Yeppoon. Good
nice
part of the world.
Day here.
So, Peter Dutton says that we should be preparing for war. I guess if anywhere's hit, it'll be Queensland first if China moves into the Solomon Islands. But what do you make of his comments?
Well, that's a positive thought to start the morning there with Peter. But
sorry, I mean, it is a hypothetical, but it's what people are talking about.
I'm sure that there won't be a Brisbane line this time. So I know that our government and hopefully any Australian government would defend all of Australia, including up here in beautiful Yeppoon and North Queensland. And obviously this is something that is exercising the mind of all Australians. And I think the Labor Party here are just, it's far too little too late. From them. They've spent the last few years mocking the federal government and our stance on warning about the threats of China. Indeed, only a few years ago, Penny Wong fought against our efforts to lower the threshold for agricultural investment in Australia. She wanted the Chinese to buy up to $1 billion of farmland each time. And they actually moved in the Senate to oppose us on that. We had the Labor Party saying that we were to be at fault, the federal government was at fault for the deterioration in the relationship with China. And so the Labor Party cannot walk away from that record now. That's been their record the last few years. Anything you say in the next few weeks before an election can't be trusted.
What do you make of the commentary that continues to come? Brendan O'Connor said this a short time ago, that the Solomon Islands are continuing to be miffed at us about our climate change policies, yet turning to China, which is the world's biggest emitter. There's something humorous about that.
Absolutely, Peter, and other people have pointed this out, as you have in your question there. It's unbelievable that Brendan has repeated that. About a month ago, Anthony Albanese made that claim and was widely mocked. And I've noticed since then he hasn't repeated it because, as you have said, the Solomon Islands here have signed an agreement with the world's largest emitter, the world's largest coal producer. And so any kind of suggestion somehow that the Solomon Islands are moving away from us and into China's embrace over climate change is ridiculous and absurd. And I just think if these people like Brendan O'Connor, who knows if he'll be the Defence Minister or not, but if Brendan really does believe this, it's got to cause all Australians to be a little bit nervous about how Labor would approach this because they just seem naive. I mean, when you listen to some Labor shadow ministers, they seem to think that all we need to do is just fly over to Beijing and have a cup of green tea with Xi Jinping and everything will be all right. I mean, this is toxic naivety from the Labor Party that would weaken our position and would allow the Chinese government to ride roughshod over the interests of this nation.
OK, on to other climate matters. The Queensland LNP candidate Colin Boyce says the government's net zero plan is not binding and flexible. There is wiggle room there, he says. Is he right?
Well, Colin's absolutely right. The Paris Agreement's not binding. Doesn't bind any nation. In fact, we've just seen in the last few weeks that Boris Johnson, the UK Prime Minister, has paused his nation's climate change commitments, his nation's net zero commitments. So none of this is binding on us, and nor should it be in the context of China seeking to build military bases in the Pacific Islands. We should be following Boris Johnson and pausing our net zero commitments given the aggression of China in our region. There is just no need for us to focus on this right now when we have a clear and present danger in front of us. And if anyone wants to criticise us, well, of course, we've got the example there of what Europe is doing. But the best thing to do would be avoid getting into the situation Europe is in, pause our net zero commitments now and focus on the much greater threat to Australia.
I know that you're not into it, but is the government still committed to net zero by 2050?
Well, as I say here, look, 2050 is a long way away, and I think the commitments right now over the next few years should be to defend our nation. Our commitment should be, our focus should be on building new coal-fired power stations. So we've had record power prices here in Australia across the last 3 weeks of April after the Liddell coal-fired power station shut its first unit. And they're off the charts. It's not just records. They are almost double the previous peaks for April, these power prices. We don't need hydrogen. Hydrogen hubs is not going to defend us against military bases in the Solomon Islands. We need reliable power now. And that's why we should be building the coal-fired power station now, because if we don't, we're going to leave ourselves vulnerable.
Well, there is going to be an announcement relating to hydrogen hubs in Townsville and Gladstone, near where you are today. But just a final one here on Chris Bowen. He confirmed that coal miners will have to comply with a more stringent safeguard mechanism. What are your thoughts on his comments over the weekend?
Well, the Labor Party has just finally admitted that they are planning to put in place a new carbon tax. A new carbon tax, which is going to hit almost every mine in this country. What's left of our factories too will be subject to this carbon tax. And they've been trying to hide this. In fact, local Labor MPs on the ground in regional areas have been saying, oh no, the mines will be exempt. They've been caught out lying to their constituents, because Chris Bowen admitted on the weekend that yes, coal mines will be subject to this new tax. It'll be a new carbon tax requiring mines right across Australia to buy carbon credits. It'll apply to our nation's last 2 oil refineries. So who knows?
But won't it be policed by a government agency? Isn't all that policed by a government agency anyway?
Yeah, okay. That gives a lot of assurance to people in regional Queensland that the amount of tax that coal mines and factories will have to pay will be determined by a Green Labor government agency, the Clean Energy Regulator, after the election. So they can't tell us now how much tax the Curragh mine at Blackwater has to pay, how much tax the Tomago aluminium smelter in the Hunter has to pay. They can't tell us that before the election. They're going to negotiate with Adam Bandt and the Greens after the election about what the bill should be for regional Australia. That obviously scares the bejesus out of people in regional Queensland, and it's why people are leaving the Labor Party in droves in country areas because they just don't back our jobs, they don't fight for us, and now to boot, they're trying to lie to us too.
Okay, Matt Canavan, we'll leave it there. Thank you for your time, though. We'll talk to you again soon.